Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. I'm Michael Marchuk.
And I'm Brad Hairston.
And this is our weekly pulse check of AI and automation news. As we always do, we're going to cover 3 articles. And again, today I've got a bonus one for Brad to go through. And all the articles will be linked in our show notes if you'd like to go read them for yourself. So let's jump right into it. From the Register, thousands of AI agents later, who even remembers what they do? All right, this is kind of speaking to some of the things that we've talked about in the past in terms of some sprawl when it came to building out programs at scale. So Gartner had some interesting ideas on this because this is who the Register is quoting some of the Gartner. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the article starts off, or the title and everything makes it sound like it's raising a level of fear just around even RPA, but it's really directed at agentic AI. And, instead of fueling the fire around agentic AI, Gartner's putting up a bit of a warning flag here. And good for them. I've been kind of waiting for one of the analysts in the market to sound the alarm and say, hey, this is all really cool. Yeah, but is the market really ready for this? I would say they're not quite ready. I mean, it's going to come, but maybe not yet. But Gartner does forecast that a third of enterprise software in the not so distant future will incorporate these agentic AIs. And, they're making the case that if that's true, I mean, think about the fact today that we've deployed thousands and thousands of RPA, digital workers or bots. Once we start deploying hundreds, if not thousands, of these agentic AI-centric bots, there's new risk. There's new things that we need to account for. And just knowing what these agents are doing is one. I mean, that alone is concerning. So I agree with that. I think agentic it opens up a whole new realm of risk because, again, you're not bringing a structure or a workflow to the table to say, this is what you ought to do. Here's how you go solve this problem. It's all outcome oriented. It's letting these AI agents make decisions and change direction if they think they have a better path to go down. It's a really interesting and exciting innovation in AI. But you really need to treat it carefully. And I think, the point they're making is, gosh, if we have hundreds and thousands of these things in all of our companies, things could really get out of control pretty quickly. So I think they're very wise to say, we need to create journey maps. We need to think about customer experience. We need to think about the guardrails that are needed before we hand it over. And one other thing I'll say, Michael, I think, this clearly is an advantage of RPA digital workers, that they are carefully trained and governed, and that, using them to provision Gen AI into software, into process automations is a safe, a secure, a scalable way to do that. I mean, they will have a role to play with agentic AI as well, but that still needs to take some time to take shape. And, the other thing is they're a resource pool. They're separate and distinct from the process workflows that they're trained to execute. So, I want to dispel any kind of concern that might be out there about, that Gartner is saying we're out of control today. We're not out of control today. The bots are well governed. We know what they're doing. and they're not assigned to processes. They're not dedicated to process. They were a resource pool, so they are governed and managed in a much more controlled way than this article may imply.
Right.
I know that
One
we
thing-
didn't need that kind of caveat, but I
appreciate
just
your
wanted to
insights.
start out there.
One of the things that struck me too is we start talking about, so they brought this up, the differences between, our traditional RPA and going into a agentic AI environment. And what really kind of brought me back is thinking about this, like you mentioned, they're not necessarily told what to do. They just asked about to create an outcome. And I just was just thinking about the systems on the back end that are maintaining all the data from this, and how within an RPA environment or something that's structured by a human, you can put some guidance and guardrails in there in terms of how frequently and how fast to access systems, and where to get data from and how to use that data and what to do if the data doesn't match, etc. Versus an agentic system, which may decide that, right now I need to have the most current data every millisecond and pound the heck out of your back-end systems to the point where you can't control it because the agent is just asking to get information so it could be, doing its thing. So anyway, interesting concept. Certainly we'll continue to watch the space from agentic, as as we go forward. So our second one is from Forbes. Title of its article is From Automation to Autonomy, How Agentic AI is Transforming Accounting. So we talked about agents doing their thing. When I think of accounting, I don't really think of creativity specifically, because I think accounting is very much rule-based. We don't want to have agents making up their rolling rules as agentic AI tries to get an outcome, and maybe creative accounting comes into a play. But this article had an interesting perspective that I didn't consider. Can you maybe go walk us through this article?
Yes, creative accounting usually lands you in jail, from what I understand. So this article is written by the CEO of a startup that is providing what he calls agentic AI, specifically around document processing. So you can see the connection to the accounting space, and perhaps he's providing some services to accounting firms. No doubt there are some viable use cases around automation and AI in the accounting world. There's AI is already playing a big role there. When you start to talk about agentic, it gets a little dicey because, again, you don't want AI, going off on its own and using some kind of creative way to solve a problem. What you do want is you want agentic to have good outcomes that are well governed and well structured, so that if it needs to, and one of the examples in the article was around these complex tax withholding assessments that have a lot of local regulations that need to be factored in. You do want an agentic agent or AI bot to be able to understand when those things are happening and be able to go and pull regulations in and really, make sure the local context is applied and work through all the rules as they exist today. You don't want it to be more creative than that. So I think, just like we talked about in the prior article, the promise of agentic AI is truly astounding, and there's no doubt we will have these autonomous agents showing up in most of our applications, before too long. The question of when and where and how that companies will be willing to put them into practice, that still needs to be answered. I tend to think it's probably going to be in less sensitive areas, like customers, like it may be better in customer service or vendor onboarding or recruiting, things like that. Accounting seems like a little bit riskier area to start out in. But I do agree there are use cases that come to mind and ways that I think true agentic AI could play a role in the accounting space. And I think we're going to have agents that have roles like this all throughout companies, accounting, accountant or recruiter or supply chain expert. I mean, we're going to have agents that have that level of expertise. They've been trained and fed data and beyond anything that we as humans could ingest. And they're going to have capabilities that can put that to use. And it's going to be really impressive once those things are in action, but maybe not quite yet.
Well, I agree with you that the roles that these agents may play are going to affect our organizations. And I do believe there's a place for them, even within accounting, and especially according to this article, some of the invoice processing. We've seen that over and over again, how invoices come with all kinds of different formats. So having, I won't say creative, but the capability of being unstructured to a point where it can understand or try to understand a document that's been presented to it that it's never seen before and pull out the relevant information. That's what humans typically do. They'll go out and receive information. They know this is an invoice. They're in that state of mind, and they can start looking for the relevant information. So I can see how agents, an AI agent within that context, would be able to extract the information we're looking for, and then be able to interpret perhaps some of these tax treaties between countries and whatnot in ways that would be able to support it. But as you mentioned, accounting in general isn't a creative sport, right? So
Right.
So as we talk about this next article, we've talked about the topics like this for a little bit, but this one's got maybe something else that we can kind of hone in on. This one's from Forbes. The article is how AI is reshaping industries and creating tomorrow's job market. Now, I know we've talked about this type of thing a couple times on a Pulse Check. This article has a slightly different spin to it in a couple different areas. Tell us what you pulled out of this article.
Yeah, it covers a lot of things. I think the most interesting part of the article, honestly, was right at the very end when it talks about the, technology disruption. When it occurs, it usually goes through 3 different waves. And it gives the example of the internet to explain it. So the first wave is typically around infrastructure build out. The second wave is developing and managing software platforms and services on top of that technology. And then the third wave is where you get into, applications that are tailored to end consumers. And with the internet, that largely expressed itself through mobile applications. So if you look at it today, and the author does a good job of then carrying it, or bringing it forward to what we're going through today. Right now, he believes that we are in the infrastructure wave. And, that has, I think we're playing catch up there to a degree, but right behind that, the enterprise integration and the edge applications are starting to come at a faster and faster pace. But the infrastructure piece, I 100% agree with that. You think about, the rise of NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA all of a sudden is like the largest company in the world, market cap size. You have we did a podcast with Bain talking about the power sourcing for AI, how there's a real dilemma globally. There aren't enough data centers and enough power right now to meet the demand of AI. You have the large tech companies that are rebooting nuclear power plants, like 3 Mile Island, literally rebooting it to be able to have nuclear power at its disposal to run an AI farm. You have bit mining operations who are converting over to AI farms because they think they're going to make more money, although now they're probably going back to Bitcoin mining. But there's just all this stuff that is like this fury of activity that is around, okay, these models are here. It's just going to continue to proliferate. Companies are adopting AI at a faster pace. We've got to have the infrastructure. We got to have the power. We got to have the servers. We got to have the data centers. And it seems like every country in the world is playing catch up right there. So once we once we kind of stabilize that, I think we're going to see more of the enterprise integration. We're already seeing it, but I think it's going to really take off. So I've heard people say every enterprise application on the market is going to be, centered around AI and generative AI specifically. So think about all the big ERP applications as an example. They're all going to have a GUI that is Gen AI powered. So yeah, I liked that part of it. To me, that I think he paved that, or he outlined that in a really logical way. And I see that this lines up with what we've seen happening right before our eyes.
Agreed. The other part of this that I thought was interesting was you talked about the rise of the AI agents, but he put them in different levels. So similar to the 3 waves, he indicated 5 specific levels for these agents and understanding where their autonomy or level of autonomy would be. And again, like you mentioned, we're still starting out. And even with all of the advances that we've had and seen over the past couple of years, the market is still very fresh. And the application of generative AI in these various areas is continuing to evolve. Now, maybe without looking back, or looking back at the internet, without saying it took us X number of years to get from internet infrastructure to the full-on wave 3 application. I think we're going to see the same levels and the same progression, but I think we're going to see them much more quickly, given where we're at in the market, and not to say the level of hype, but the level of expertise that people have built up over these past years, understanding how this sort of market works. So it's going to be really interesting to see where we're at in the next 2 years.
Yeah, no doubt.
So speaking of years, let's take you back. So this next article is from CIO, and the title of the article is AI on the Mainframe? IBM might be onto something. Now, I know this harkens back to the days of yore. When I think of IBM and mainframes, I do think about dinosaur technology. But this article brings up some more interesting concepts. So what did it talk about?
Yeah, this did take me back. I thought about the big Amdahl mainframe at my university that we used to have to log into to run batch jobs, and I remember the old IBM 3270 dumb terminals that we would use and I would use in my job in the early days of my career. And man, this is a blast from the past. So Michael, get this, the System 370 was the big IBM mainframe back in the late 80s, early 90s. It processed a few million instructions per second.
I remember we talked about MIPS. MIPS was the big number. How many MIPS does this processor do?
Yeah, so that's what they were doing back then. Today, the laptop you have sitting in front of you does tens of billions of instructions per second. And I also read that an IBM 370 essentially has about the rough equivalent of processing power as your smartphone today. Think about that. But enough sentimental, looking backward. This is interesting. I mean, the article points out that in the financial services and the insurance business in particular, they are still largely dedicated to their mainframes. And I think I read in the article 70% of the credit card transactions globally are processed through mainframes. And these things are data hogs. I mean, they or data repositories. Let me put a positive spin on it. They are, most of the big data that these financial services companies, for example, are managing. The mainframe has become the repository for that data. And what is it that AI needs? It needs lots and lots and lots of data. So I think it makes sense that IBM would say, look, we are still relevant. We are still in all these Fortune 500 companies, and we are still the source of all this data that AI needs, especially local data. And so why not create a new version or new products with our platforms to host generative AI models. And it is interesting. They said we want to run generative AI models. We don't want to train them. So,
Right.
Let NVIDIA, let all the, the newer, more nuanced hardware tools that are specific to AI algorithms and optimizing them, do it with that technology. But in terms of, running the actual models, we can be the host for that. And so they're really positioning one of their new and upcoming products to be a viable option. And who are we to say that they can't do it? They've proven everybody wrong, and I think people have killed them off 10 or
Dozens
12
of
times.
times. Exactly.
And they're still there, still running those COBOL 2 programs that you and I, developed and implemented back in the late 80s, early 90s. So, I thought it was an interesting article and good for IBM.
I think so too. I think it's an interesting concept, and you think about mainframes just in general, and you're right. It does harken back to a day of well, that's old-fashioned, right? Why would anybody really use that? But when you mentioned the fact that 70% of credit card traffic goes through these types of systems, you realize, in fact, that there's a place for every one of these kinds of tools within our ecosystem. And taking a mainframe, which is transaction monster. I mean, that's what it does. It handles transactions with sub-millisecond latency. That's what you want when you're swiping all these credit cards through every vendor known to man across the world, plus all the stuff we do online. This is important that we have low latency. And so you have a system that's built, and it's really almost tailored designed for managing transactions with this kind of low latency. So I think it's a great idea to take the platform they've built out over decades now and tuned. And now they're, again, bringing some new life to it by leveraging some new hardware that'll manage generative AI inside the platform, allowing them to get some additional insights out of all that massive amount of data and transactions that they're pushing through it. So very interesting stuff. And I'm sure we'll see more from this kind of platform as we go, as they think of some new ideas. So anyway, those are the articles we've got for today. Thanks for joining us. I will make sure that these are all in the show notes, and we can't wait to hear from you. So send us a note. We want to know what you're thinking about all the stuff we're doing. So leave a comment in any one of these, either on YouTube on the videos or on any one of your Spotify or Apple platform, because we want to hear from you. But until next time, tune in for our next guest we have coming up in this next week, and we're looking forward to checking out what we're going to see for you on the next Pulse Check. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.